Welcome to the London Free Press Podcast. I'm your host, Rachel Gilbert. Well, it is football month in Canada. We had the Grey Cup last weekend, and this coming weekend is the Vanier Cup right here in London. Even though it's being played in their stadium after winning the Vanier Cup last year, the Western Mustangs are out of the big game this year, but it will be here in London for the very first time ever. And of course, London is going to be buzzing with football fans before the big game between Laval and Saskatchewan at Western's Alumni Stadium Saturday, November 26th. So today I'm talking with London Free Press sports reporter Ryan Pyette about who to watch and just how popular this game is going to be with Londoners, even though the Mustangs aren't playing. Hi, Ryan. How are you?
I'm great, Rachel. Thanks for having me on again.
Yeah, no problem. Well, we've got a big game coming up, so we've got to talk to you about it. Of course, we were hoping that Western would be in this game, but they lost last weekend, so they're out. Which really sucks. That sucks for us.
Yeah, it's not the dream way of doing it. I remember at the start of the year when we were talking to Greg Marshall, Western coach, about it. Um, and he says this isn't like the Memorial Cup, like with the Knights got in the Memorial Cup, and one year they went 0-3, but they were still in it, and the everybody remembers '05, they won it, and that was like the dream season. And I think everybody in London, they want to have that experience again, and whether it's the baseball team or the basketball team, and same for Western. And they were right on track, and I think that's why the excitement was happening. They kind of just were pounding everybody in Ontario, and just everyone knew Laval was going to be a terrific task, but I think people were confident that they had enough, and they just didn't. And you could get some. You can get some tickets on StubHub right now for the game. I think a lot of
Oh
a lot of
no.
Western fans, and I talked to a few people pretty connected to the Western team. I'm like, "Are you going to the game?" And they're like, let me check my kid's schedule or something like.
Oh boy.
It'd be pretty painful to go. I'm sure Greg will be there, but it's just one of those things. Whenever you agree to host something, you hope for the best. And they had a really good team. So,
Yeah.
to make it to the Final Four, I think the worst parts I've seen over the years in Memorial Cups and stuff like that, where the teams are just terrible, or they get knocked out in the first round of the playoffs. And then when you go to those Memorial Cups, that you can feel like the fans are very upset, right? And I know
Yeah.
everybody's upset here, but it's like you look at that Laval team. I don't think a ton of people are going to cheer for them. I think to probably be pro Saskatchewan because of what happened there. And no one wants to see Laval. Laval's 110, Western's 1-8. And I think people were hoping if Western won this year, they'd climb back on top to that, at some
Mm-hmm.
point, past Laval. Because I think that was a big thing when Laval's been winning every couple of years, and they got up to 10 pretty quickly. And
Right.
Western has all that tradition for 50 years, and they've been to the Vanier Cup the most times. And I
Right.
think they want to they want to have that mantle again as the top team. So it's going to be tough to watch Laval be that top team again
Yeah.
on their field.
I know. Well, yeah, it's going to be a tough game for Laval because yeah, you're right. I don't know if anyone's going to be cheering for them when they're here. This is our first time ever hosting the Vanier Cup, which kind of blows my mind because Western's been to it the most times.
Yeah, like there's been a lot of semifinals here, and just the way the Vanier Cup, as a lot of people know, it was in Toronto all the time. It was kind of seen as there was an East and a West semifinal bowl for many years, and they thought, hey, we'll just get to Toronto. A lot of times, like a team, it cut down on travel to have it in Toronto. There, an Ontario team usually got there, so
Mm-hmm.
it made a lot of sense. It was at Varsity Stadium first, which is a beautiful stadium to this day on Bloor Street. Then it went to Exhibition Stadium for a couple of years, and then obviously when the Sky Dome opened, the Rogers Center, it was there for a long time. And the first, I think, 39 years was played in Toronto before it moved out to Saskatoon, where it was like the coldest game. It was like -30 or something like that.
Oh
It was the
my.
coldest game ever, and they were like. So then it went to Hamilton, and it's been so London Western Alumni Stadium. That'll be the 10th it'll be the 10th field, 10th stadium that the game's played in. But the first time in 34 years it's been on a campus in Ontario, which is obviously, that's pretty historical. It was at varsity, and I know that the sense is, hey, we've partnered with the CFL to mixed reviews. We've gone to the big Tim Hortons Field, former Ivor Wynn in Hamilton. We've been to the big ones. Let's try to have it more like on campuses and stuff like that. I think it's a great idea. They did it in Laval for the previous 3 cups, and obviously same thing when Laval's there. It's you can't beat the atmosphere, right? But I was there last year, and it was a nice storm, and it was after COVID, so December. It was in December. It was the latest game ever. It was brutal cold and windy, and only about 5,000, I think 6,000 people showed up because Laval wasn't in it. If Laval was in it, there would have been 18,000.
Well, yeah. And so this one here in London is sold out. Like we actually sold out tickets before we knew Western wasn't going to be there, right?
Yeah, and I think that's a testament to London. I can't think of too many events that have come here, like these kind of things. Like you go back to the Brier or the Memorial Cups and different events like that they people want to see that, right? They want to, just like the concerts, at Bud Gardens, you want to see something, and you don't want to drive to Toronto or Detroit to do it. And it's, I think there is that factor too. And it's a great game. As Murray Faulkner he's the honorary chair, and he was crossing his fingers last week hoping Western would get in. But I think he told me the sponsorship, he just went to London. He went to London companies and said, will you support that game? And the Western Mustangs football team is so entrenched in the community that no one turned them down. It's going to be a financial winner, whether there's some empty spots in the stands or not, right?
Sure. So. Yeah. Well, let's talk. Oh, I also wanted to mention before my next question, there's a lot of stuff happening. If you don't have tickets to the game, there's a lot of other things happening that you can attend outside of the game. Is that right?
Yeah, I think it's great. So Football Ontario and Football Canada, which are kind of the organizing bodies of amateur football in the country, they have a bunch of, there's clinics and there's a bunch of things for kids to do. And then, the one every year they have the banquet for the All Canadians. It's going to be at the Convention Center. And that's a really exciting thing on Thursday night. And the thing I'm most excited about is the Fan Fest, which kicks off in the morning. It's like a tailgate party in the parking lot at Huron Flats, and it's going to have. I know they're going to have a bunch of legends coming back, like Andy Fantuz is going to come back. It's always great to see him, and they're just going to talk. And there's and I think Delaney Jane will be there, who's the halftime performer, right? She'll meet with the fans and stuff like that. So I think it's going to be a really good show.
Yeah. Well, it'll be a fun event anyways, of course. And we as Londoners, as you said, we love it when these things come to our town because it's convenient and it's fun too. So let's talk about the game. This is what I was going to ask. The game between Laval and Saskatchewan. Who is the favorite? What are you predicting for this game?
Well, most people I talk to think Laval's the favorite now. I don't think that's just the historical. Like Laval's been in 12 of these before, and they've won 10 of them. So when they get there, they win it for the most part. Mm-hmm. Saskatchewan is a fairly similar team to the team that lost to Western. I think Western, if the conditions were better than they were last year, I think Western would have won by a bigger score last year. So, Western had a lot of, a good returning core from that team, and Laval beat them. So, I would think Laval's the favorite. I hope it's a good game. So the game Laval-Western was exciting to me because Western was ahead, and then Laval came, and then it got tight late. It was only a one score. I hope for something like that. I hope it's not Laval scores 14 in the first quarter and then they bulldoze. I hope Saskatchewan maybe does something early, and they do have some playmakers that can really do that. Although, what I saw at Laval defense is like these guys are, to shut down the Western running game, and that's in November when it's time to run the ball because it's so cold and windy. It was unbelievable. The Western offensive line, they're talking about one of maybe the best offensive lines, in recent history, and that Laval didn't let them get any traction. So
Yeah. Well, I was going to ask you, are there any certain players we should be watching? The defensive line, I guess you mentioned.
yes, yeah. So and it's funny because Laval has a linebacker, Alec Poirier, and he was the MVP of the Mitchell Bowl against Western, and he's about the size of a defensive lineman, like a part of the rush unit, but he lines up as like a linebacker, so you don't know if he's going into pass coverage or coming at you. And I know when you run the ball, when you try to get the ball in the middle of the field, he was really dominant. And there's the quarterback on Laval is very good. Both quarterbacks are very good. And Arnaud Desjardins, very good. Now, if they fix their snap issues from last week, they were snapping the ball over his head, and they had Nicholas Thibodeau, their center, had a rough game against Western. So if they can control the ball, it's going to be tough for Saskatchewan. Saskatchewan too. What happens to these programs? Laval with CGF, the kids go to like a junior college after high school, so that when they come to it's the same in Saskatchewan. They get some older kids out there. There's some, it's not the ordinary to see some 23, 24, 25-year-olds in the game, right? So, and usually they're in the power positions to, move the line and that sort of thing. So, yeah, there's all kinds of talent. Laval, Kevin Maital, who is a big talker, a receiver, excellent receiver. Wasn't really keyed on him, and he only got 77 yards on 6 catches, but a one-handed catch. Like, I couldn't believe the quality of like, just like you see in the NFL every week, right? And he's always good. He'll sell some tickets, I guess. He'll probably say something about Saskatchewan because he said about to Western, no, finally they're going to face a real offense, and so he's pretty brash, and that's always great, right? Like when from our perspective, the more they talk, the better.
Sure.
So,
Absolutely. Are we expecting a lot of fans from Quebec and Saskatchewan to come down?
yes. Now, at last glance, they're actually, so the stadium holds around 8,000 people on the sides, and they're bringing in temporary seating because to go around the end, because they expect a lot of people to drive from Quebec City, and then a lot of people to fly in from Saskatoon. And if anybody knows Saskatchewan football, the Rough Riders obviously is like an institution there, and the best fans in the CFL. And it's pretty close with the Huskies too. They're also proud of that program too. I remember being out. I've been out there many times out west, and you'd see it, the Rough Riders logo, every restaurant, bar, Rough Riders logo, and when you're in the Saskatoon area, there's the Huskies logo, right? So it's they got a long tradition too. It's really and they're trying to avoid, Saskatchewan's trying to avoid losing their 8th Vanier Cup, which they're tied with Western right now, having lost 7 apiece, and so they don't want that, especially at Western. They don't want to lose that game. They've won 3. They've had a great tradition, but you don't. It's like you kind of want to get there and win, right? It's like the difference between Michael Jordan and LeBron James, right?
Absolutely, yeah. Well, there's hope that London and Western will be more of a regular host for Vanier Cup. Are we going to be seeing that more often with the cup being held at the universities on campuses?
Yeah, I hope so. I hope Western gets itself. I think the success of the event will, it will become a rotation now. Whether it's I don't think it'll come back next year. There isn't a host yet, so it's up for grabs. But Laval held it 3 years in a row, and there's no reason. Oh, with the COVID in between, but there's no reason that Western couldn't hold a future one. I mean, everything's there for it. So I think it would be in the rotation. Like, it'd be great if in a couple of years it came back. I think the sponsorship's there, but again, it's like it would be nice if they have a chance. Like, they got to keep churning out these. Greg's got to keep churning out these great teams so they have a chance to get in it. Because I think that spurred a lot of the talk of the Vanier Cup this year, from my perspective, was the fact that Western's going to be in it.
Sure. Yeah, absolutely. The story that you have on lfpress.com right now kind of talks about how the teams make it to the finals, and doing the rotating bowl games versus the national ranking system. You think that might that could be an alternative way to get to the Final Four. Can you expand a little bit on that, and if we change and why we would and what that means?
Yeah, so like in the United States, they have a ranking system, and that's how is Michigan the number 3 team? Well, they're never going to play Alabama in the regular season, so they just kind of have to go. A bunch of guys have to go together, and I know there's different polls and stuff, and they come up with a kind of a consensus for the top teams in the country. And U Sports has a top 10, but I'd like to see, when you get to the semifinals, so you get the 4 conference winners, I'd like to see them quickly sit down and say, because it really doesn't matter. The game's going to be played, like if Western won, the game was going to be played in London anyway. So if it was at Queen's, it would have been in Kingston, right? So I think it would be best to rank the 4 remaining teams and then just have 1 versus 4 and 2 versus 3. Western and Laval were the top 2 teams in the country, and they played in the semifinal. And the thinking from people that I talked to is like, well, that would have been a great Vanier Cup game, so why don't you rank them? And then so you would have had Western play St. Francis Xavier. Now you could have played it at Western or out east. It doesn't really matter. And then you could have had Laval and Saskatchewan, which it ends up being the Vanier Cup game as a semi. And then you go to the finals. Now you have to figure out the venues and all that sort of thing. But
yeah,
and you got to get people not to fight about it or but a little bit of controversy would be good. Maybe in the Canadian game, there's maybe there's not enough, and in the U.S. there's a little bit more, right? Oh, the Ohio State, Michigan, who's better kind of thing. It spurs a lot of talk, right? And I don't think we'll ever get to the point where we see regular like power conferences where we see Western, Saskatchewan, Laval playing against each other during the regular season, because the kids are still in school, and we gotta respect that, and you can't really make the season any longer. But it would have been great to see, because last week we were calling this the real Vanier Cup, and it's kind of an insult to the Vanier Cup. The real Vanier Cup should have the 2 best teams on it, and leave some space for upsets and that sort of thing, right? Which always happen. But yeah, that would be interesting. I think, you know what, the original, people don't know this, but there's a rich history of the Vanier Cup. And before it was actually called the Vanier Cup, they had an invitational. Where like the top team in the West would just it would get together with the top team in the East, and they just figure out. Back then they figure out who the top 2 teams were. So if they could do that 60 years ago, they could probably do it now, right?
Sure. A little bit of controversy it's a good talking point anyway. Yeah. Okay, well, I just wanted to wrap it up with they're handing out awards this weekend. They're doing the awards and a Hall of Fame announcement. So is there anybody on the Western team that maybe we're looking at to win some of these awards or be nominated for the Hall of Fame?
Yeah, Keon Edwards, the great running back for Western, he was the player of the year in Ontario. So he automatically goes forward for the Heck Crichton Award, which is the player of the year. And that's handed out this week. And, he had a great year, but a lot of guys, in the other conferences, Mason Nyhouse, who's the quarterback for Saskatchewan, had an unbelievable passing year, and he did last year too. And I think him and Keon, that'll be a good battle. And Danny Valente Jr. Is stand-up defensive player of the year in the province. He's up for it too. And of course, Greg Marshall was the Ontario Coach of the Year for like the 8th time. No surprise there. But and he's won it a couple times at the national level. So we'll see if that's great. Obviously the voting's in before the Laval game, and he was undefeated, and they were ranked number 1 all year. So he'd have a real chance to win that one too.
All right. Well, we'll definitely be watching your reporting on that and certainly the game this weekend. So thanks so much, Ryan, for joining us.
Anytime, Rachel.